Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the screens again. The night shift on Watch Post 7 was always quiet. Too quiet. He had been watching the same empty space for 6 hours now. Stars dotted the darkness like tiny diamonds. Nothing moved out there except the usual space dust and old satellites. The monitoring station floated at the edge of human space. It was their job to watch for anything that did not belong. Pirates, smugglers, or worse things that might come from the deep dark between stars. Jake liked the quiet work. It was better than being on a warship where people shouted orders all day. Amy Carter sat at the sensor station next to him. She was new, only 3 months on the job. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she checked each system. The sensors could see for light years in every direction. They could spot a ship the size of a fighter from very far away. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison," Amy said suddenly. Her voice was tight with worry. "I am getting something strange here." Jake turned to look at her screen. Numbers and lines moved across it in patterns he knew well. But something was wrong. The energy readings showed a massive object moving through space. It was bigger than anything Jake had ever seen. "How big?" he asked. Amy checked her readings twice. "Sir, it is huge. Maybe 5 times larger than our biggest ship, but that is not the weird part." "What is the weird part?" "It got past the defense grid. All of our warning systems. They did not see it at all. It is like the ship is invisible to our sensors. But I can see it because of the energy it puts out." Jake felt cold fear in his stomach. The Kepler defense grid was the best early warning system humans had ever built. Nothing should be able to get past it without setting off alarms. If something could do that, it meant their technology was far beyond what humans could build. "Show me the course," Jake said. Amy's fingers moved fast. A new display showed the path of the unknown ship. It was heading straight into human space, not toward any specific planet or station, just moving in like it owned the place. "Wake up, Captain Brooks," Jake ordered. "Right now." Amy pressed the emergency call button. Within 2 minutes, Captain Lisa Brooks arrived on the bridge. Her hair was messy from sleep, but her eyes were sharp and ready. She had been a soldier for 20 years and knew danger when she saw it. "Report," she said. Jake pointed at the screen. "Unknown vessel, massive size, got past all our defenses. Amy spotted it on the deep energy scans." Captain Brooks studied the readings. Her face got more serious with each number she saw. "This ship is not in any of our databases. The shape is wrong. The energy signature is wrong. Everything about it is wrong." She turned to the communications officer. "Send an alert to Fleet Command. Priority 1. Tell them we have an unknown contact of massive size heading into the inner systems." "Yes, Captain." Brooks looked at Jake. "How long until it reaches the nearest colony?" Jake did quick math in his head. "If it keeps this speed, maybe 18 hours to reach New Boston." 18 hours. Brooks nodded slowly. "Not much time." She turned to Amy. "Can you tell me anything else about this ship?" Amy worked at her station. "The hull appears to be made of some kind of metal we do not know. The energy readings suggest it has weapons, but I cannot tell what kind, and Captain, there is something else." "What?" "It is scanning us. Right now. I can feel the sensor beams touching our station." Brooks felt the same cold fear that Jake had felt. If the alien ship was scanning them, it knew they were here. It knew they had spotted it, and it was not trying to hide anymore. "Red alert," Brooks ordered. "All stations, combat ready. Send another message to Fleet Command. Tell them the unknown. Ship is actively scanning our position." Alarms began to sound throughout the station. Red lights flashed in every corridor. Men and women ran to their battle stations. Watch Post 7 was not a warship, but it had enough weapons to defend itself against pirates or small raiders. Jake doubted their weapons would do much against something that big. "Captain," the communications officer called out, "Fleet Command is responding. Admiral Hayes wants to talk to you directly." Brooks moved to the main screen. The face of Admiral Peter Hayes appeared. He was an old man with gray hair and hard eyes. He had fought in 3 wars and never lost a battle. "Captain Brooks, what exactly are we dealing with?" "Sir, we have a ship of unknown origin. Size estimates put it at over 2 kilometers long. It bypassed all our early warning systems and is heading into human space." 2 kilometers? The Admiral's eyes went wide. "Are you certain?" "Yes, sir. And Admiral, it is scanning our station right now. It knows we can see it." Admiral Hayes was quiet for a moment. Jake could see him thinking hard about what this meant. Finally, the Admiral spoke. "Captain, I am sending every ship we have in the area to your position. Do not engage unless fired upon, but be ready for anything." "Understood, sir." The connection ended. Brooks turned back to her crew. "You heard the Admiral. We wait and watch, but everyone stays ready." Jake looked at the screen showing the alien ship. It was still moving toward them, steady and sure. Whatever was on that ship, it was not afraid of humans. It was coming into their space like it had every right to be there. "Amy," Jake said, "keep scanning. I want to know everything about that ship." "Yes, sir." Hours passed slowly. The alien ship kept coming. More human ships began to arrive near Watch Post 7. Destroyers and cruisers took positions around the station. Everyone waited. Then, Amy spoke again. "Sir, the ship is slowing down. It is stopping." Jake looked at the display. The massive alien ship had come to a complete stop just outside the range of human weapons. It sat there in space like a giant metal mountain, silent, waiting. "What is it doing?" Brooks asked. "I do not know, Captain, but I think we are about to find out." On every human ship and station in the area, people watched their screens and waited. They all knew that everything was about to change. Humanity was no longer alone in this part of space. Something else was here. Something big and powerful and unknown, and it was not going away. Admiral Peter Hayes stood in the command center of Fleet Headquarters on Mars. The massive room buzzed with activity as officers worked at dozens of stations. Large screens showed the positions of every human ship in space. Right now, all eyes were on the unknown vessel sitting at the edge of their territory. "Status report," Hayes ordered. Commander Steve Johnson looked up from his station. "Sir, we have 12 ships moving to intercept. Captain Ryan Clark and the UHS Defiance will arrive first. Estimated time, 4 hours." Hayes nodded. Captain Clark was one of their best. If anyone could handle first contact with an unknown alien species, it was him. "What about communications?" "We are ready, sir. Helen Murphy is our best communications specialist. She knows every language protocol we have." Hayes walked to the main display screen. The alien ship appeared as a red dot surrounded by blue dots representing human vessels. It was much larger than any of their ships. The size alone was intimidating. "Sir," another officer called out, "the alien ship is moving again." Hayes watched as the red dot began to move slowly toward the human fleet. Not fast, but steady and purposeful. It was not running away. It was coming to meet them. "Send a message to Captain Clark. Tell him to maintain distance but attempt communication as soon as he arrives." 4 hours later, Captain Ryan Clark sat on the bridge of the UHS Defiance. His ship was a heavy cruiser, one of the most powerful vessels in the human fleet. But looking at the alien ship on his screen, he felt very small. "Helen, are you ready?" he asked. Helen Murphy checked her equipment one more time. "Yes, sir. I have prepared messages in 17 different languages, mathematical sequences, music, even basic pictographs." "Good. Begin transmission." Helen activated her communications array. She started with simple mathematical concepts, numbers that any intelligent species should understand. Then she moved to pictures showing human ships, the solar system, and peaceful intentions. For 10 minutes, she sent signals on every frequency they knew. Radio waves, laser communications, subspace channels, everything. Nothing came back. "Captain," Helen said, "I'm not getting any response. Either they cannot hear us or they are choosing not to answer." Clark frowned. "Keep trying. Use the emergency frequencies." Helen tried again. This time she sent the universal peace symbol and images showing humans with their hands open and empty. Still nothing. Then something happened that nobody expected. Helen suddenly grabbed her head and cried out in pain. Every person on the bridge did the same. Clark felt like someone was pushing into his mind with sharp fingers. Images flashed in, his thoughts that were not his own. A voice spoke inside their heads. It was cold and powerful. It did not use their ears. It spoke directly to their minds. Humans. The word echoed in their thoughts like thunder. Clark tried to shake off the feeling, but the voice continued. "Your expansion ends here. Prepare for judgment." The mental pressure stopped as suddenly as it had started. Helen fell back in her chair, breathing hard. Other crew members looked around in confusion and fear. "What just happened?" Clark asked. "Sir," Helen said weakly, "I think they just talked to us, inside our heads. I have never seen anything like it." Clark activated his communications link to Admiral Hayes. "Admiral, we have made contact, but not the way we expected." Hayes's face appeared on the screen. "Explain." "Sir," they spoke, "directly into our minds. No radio, no signals. Some kind of telepathic communication. They said our expansion ends here, and we should prepare for judgment." Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "Captain, did they identify themselves?" "No, sir." But the message was clear. "This is not a friendly visit." On Mars, Admiral Hayes turned to his staff. "I want everything we know about telepathic species. Check the galactic database. See if we have any records of mental communication." Dr. Emma King, the fleet's head scientist, worked quickly at her computer. "Sir, we have 3 known species that use limited telepathy, but none of them have ships this large. And none of them have ever ventured this far into human space. So we are dealing with something new," Hayes said. "It appears so, sir." Hayes made a decision. "Captain Clark, maintain your position, but do not get closer. We need more information before we do anything else." "Understood, Admiral." Hours passed, with no further communication. The alien ship sat motionless in space. Human ships formed a careful circle around it, staying far enough away to avoid any sudden attacks. Then the voice came again. This time it reached every human in the star system. From the smallest research station to the largest battleship, everyone heard the words in their mind. "I am Overseer Vexthara of the Hegemony. You will prepare to receive me." The mental pressure was stronger this time. Many people fell to their knees as the alien mind pushed into theirs. Images flashed through their thoughts. Cities burning, ships destroyed. entire worlds under alien control. But there were other images, too. Massive fleets of different alien species all bowing before crystalline beings that looked like living diamonds. Worlds where the strong ruled the weak without mercy. A galaxy where only power mattered. When the images stopped, everyone knew they were facing something much bigger than one ship. This overseer represented an entire empire. An empire that saw humans as a problem to be solved. Admiral Hayes struggled to his feet. Around him, his officers were doing the same. The telepathic contact had been meant to intimidate them, to show them how small and weak they were. "Communications," Hayes ordered. "Send a message to Earth. Tell the President we need an emergency meeting of the Terran Council. Full priority." "Yes, sir." Hayes looked at the display showing the alien ship. "Also send word to all colony worlds. Tell them to prepare their defenses. We may be looking at war." Captain Clark's voice came through the speakers. "Admiral, the alien ship is doing something. It is changing." On every screen, humans watched as the massive ship began to transform. Parts of its hull moved and shifted like liquid metal. New sections extended outward. Weapon ports opened along its sides. "Sir," Helen Murphy reported, "I am detecting massive energy buildup. Whatever it is doing, it requires enormous power. The transformation took an hour. When it was finished, the ship looked different, more aggressive, more threatening. It was no longer just a vessel. It was a fortress capable of destroying anything humans could build." Then the voice of Overseer, Vexithara, spoke again. "Humans, you have spread through space without permission. You have claimed worlds that are not yours. You have made alliances with lesser species instead of dominating them as is proper. The hegemony has watched your expansion with growing concern." The mental words hit everyone like physical blows. "You will be given one chance to correct your errors, submit to hegemony authority, or face the consequences of your defiance." Admiral Hayes forced himself to stand straight despite the pain in his head. He looked around at his officers. All of them were afraid, but none of them were broken. "Send our response," he ordered. "Sir," Helen asked, "how do we respond to telepathic communication?" "The old-fashioned way, radio transmission on all frequencies." Helen activated the communications array. Hayes spoke clearly and firmly. "This is Admiral Peter Hayes of the human fleet. We do not recognize any authority over human space except our own. We demand to know by what right you threaten our people." The response came immediately into their minds. "By the right of the strong over the weak, by the natural order that has governed this galaxy for thousands of years. You will learn your place, humans. The judgment begins now." The air in Admiral Hayes's command center shimmered like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Everyone stopped what they were doing and stared as the distortion grew larger. The shimmer became a column of light that stretched from floor to ceiling. When the light faded, something stood in the center of the room. It was tall, maybe 9 feet, and looked like it was made of living crystal. Light moved through its transparent body in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The being had no face as humans understood it, but somehow everyone knew it was looking at them. "I am Overseer Vexithara," the creature said. Its voice echoed, in their minds and in the air at the same time. "You will listen." Admiral Hayes stepped forward. His hand moved toward his sidearm, but he stopped. Shooting at this thing would probably not help anything. "How did you get aboard my station?" "Your barriers mean nothing to us," Vexithara replied. "Your weapons cannot harm us. Your ships are toys compared to our power." The crystal being moved closer to Hayes. With each step, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "We have watched your species for 50 of your years. We have seen you spread across star systems like a disease. You take what is not yours and call it progress." Commander Steve Johnson stepped up beside his admiral. As the fleet's chief scientist and expert on alien species, he had studied every known race in the galaxy. This being was unlike anything in their records. "We have never encountered your species before," Johnson said. "What is this hegemony you represent?" Vexathara turned toward him. When it spoke, images filled everyone's minds. They saw vast fleets of different alien ships all flying in perfect formation. Worlds where crystal beings like Vexathara ruled over other species. Cities where the strong lived in luxury, while the weak served them. "The hegemony is order," Vexathara explained. "For 3,000 years, we have maintained peace in this galaxy through proper hierarchy. The strong rule. The weak serve. Each species knows its place." More images flashed through their minds. Species that looked like giant insects bowing before crystal overlords. Cat-like aliens working in mines while their crystal masters watched. Bird-like creatures serving food to beings made of living stone. "Every intelligent species follows this natural law," Vexathara continued. "Every species except yours." Admiral Hayes found his voice again. "What exactly do you mean?" "Your species is an aberration. You have become strong enough to claim many worlds, yet you do not dominate the weaker species you encounter. Instead, you make alliances with them. You protect them. You treat them as equals." The images in their minds changed. Now they saw human. Ships defending alien colonies from pirates. Human doctors treating wounded aliens. Human engineers helping other species build better technology. This behavior threatens the natural order. If other species see that the strong can cooperate with the weak instead of ruling them, they might demand such treatment for themselves. Chaos would follow. Commander Johnson understood now. "You are afraid that our way of doing things will spread to other species." "We do not know fear," Vexathara said coldly. "We know order. We know what must be done to maintain stability." Admiral Hayes stepped closer to the crystal being. "What do you want from us?" "You will choose. Submit to hegemony authority and accept your proper place in the hierarchy, or abandon half of your current territory and surrender all alien species under your protection for proper management." The room fell silent. Hayes looked around at his officers. All of them had the same expression of shock and anger. "And if we refuse both options?" Hayes asked. "Then you will be reduced to your home system and placed under direct hegemony control. Your expansion will end permanently." The Admiral felt anger rising in his chest. "You are talking about enslaving billions of people. We are talking about order, about putting an end to a dangerous experiment that threatens galactic stability." Commander Johnson spoke up again. "How many species belong to your hegemony?" 47. "Species across this region of the galaxy, all properly organized by strength and capability. And how many of them joined willingly?" Vexathara paused for a moment. "Willingness is irrelevant. What matters is order." Hayes exchanged looks with Johnson. The answer was clear. None of them had joined willingly. The hegemony was a collection of enslaved species ruled by these crystal beings. "We need time to consider your demands," Hayes said. "You have 72 of your hours. When that time ends, you will give your answer. Choose wisely, Admiral. The consequences of defiance will be severe." The crystal being began to shimmer again. Do not attempt to contact your government during this time. We are monitoring all of your communications. Any effort to prepare for war will be seen as your answer. Vexthera faded away like smoke in the wind. The temperature in the room returned to normal, but everyone still felt cold. Hayes turned to his communications officer. Get me President Santos on Earth. Emergency priority. Sir, the alien said they are monitoring our communications. Let them listen. We have nothing to hide. The large screen activated, showing the face of President Maria Santos. She was a tough woman who had led humanity through the colony expansion period. Her expression was serious as Hayes explained what had happened. So we have 3 days to decide whether to become slaves or give up half our territory, she said when he finished. That is correct, Madam President. What is your recommendation, Admiral? Hayes looked around at his officers again. He saw determination in their faces, not fear. I recommend we tell them exactly what they can do with their ultimatum. President Santos smiled grimly. I was hoping you would say that. I am calling an emergency session of the Terran Council. Every colony representative, every allied species. They need to know what we are facing. What about the time limit? Commander, Johnson asked. 72 hours is enough time to make our position clear, Santos replied. Admiral, prepare your fleets. If they want a fight, we will give them one. The connection ended. Hayes turned to his staff. You heard the President. Begin fleet mobilization, but do it quietly. I want our ships ready, but I do not want to provoke them into attacking early. Yes, sir. As his officers began working, Hayes stared at the spot where Vexthera had appeared. The crystal being had made one critical mistake. It assumed that humans would react the same way other species had when faced with superior force. It did not understand that humans had a tendency to fight harder when someone tried to tell them what to do, especially when that someone threatened their friends and allies. Commander Johnson, Hayes called out. Yes, sir? I want you to start working on countermeasures. That telepathic communication, the way they can appear anywhere they want, there has to be a way to block it or fight it. I will get our best scientists on it immediately. Hayes nodded. Good. We have 3 days to figure out how to fight something that considers itself our superior in every way. He looked at the display showing their fleet positions. Human ships were spread across dozens of star systems, protecting colonies and trade routes. They would need every vessel they could get. Also, send a message to all allied species. Let them know what is happening. They deserve to know that their freedom is at stake, too. Sir, should we ask for their help? Hayes considered that the allied species had smaller fleets and less advanced technology. Against something like the hegemony, they would not be much help in a direct fight. Ask them to prepare their defenses and be ready to evacuate if necessary. But do not ask them to fight our battles. We got them into this situation. It is our responsibility to get them out. As the command center buzzed with activity, Hayes thought about the choice they were facing. Submit or fight. Slavery or war. It was not really a choice at all. The emergency session of the Terran Council convened on Earth 18 hours after Overseer Vexthera delivered its ultimatum. Representatives from every human colony filled the Great Assembly Hall. The mood was tense as President Maria Santos stood at the central podium. Fellow citizens, she began, we face the greatest threat in human history. An alien empire calling itself the hegemony demands that we surrender our freedom or face destruction. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Many representatives had only heard rumors about what happened at the fleet headquarters on Mars. Now they were getting the full story. General Tom Bradley stood up from his seat. He was a big man with gray hair and scars from the mining wars on Titan. "Madam President, what are our military options?" Santos gestured to Admiral Hayes, who had traveled from Mars for this meeting. Hayes activated a holographic display showing the known positions of hegemony forces. "We are facing an enemy with superior technology and numbers," Hayes reported. "Their ship bypassed our best defenses like they did not exist. Their weapons appear to be far beyond anything we can build." Diplomat. Kate Williams raised her hand. She was young but had successfully negotiated treaties with 6 different alien species. "Have we tried diplomatic solutions? Perhaps there is room for compromise." Dr. Alex Reed, the Council's chief analyst, stood up next to his seat. He had spent the last day studying everything they knew about the hegemony demands. "I have reviewed their ultimatum in detail. There is no room for compromise. They want us to either become their slaves or give up everything that makes us human." "Explain," President Santos ordered. Reed activated his own display. The hegemony demands fall into 2 categories. First, complete submission to their authority. This means they would control our government, our military, our expansion into space. We would become another client species in their empire. The hall erupted in angry voices. Several representatives shouted that they would never accept slavery. Reed continued when the noise died down. "The second option is territorial surrender. They want us to abandon half of our colonies and surrender every alien species we have treaties with. Our allies would be placed under direct hegemony control for what they call proper management." Kate Williams looked shocked. "They want us to betray our allies, the species that trust us for protection?" "Exactly. And based on the images they shared, proper management means slavery and exploitation." President Santos let the implications sink in before speaking again. "So our choices are simple. Become slaves ourselves, or hand our friends over to be enslaved, while we retreat to a smaller territory." "That is correct, Madam President." General Bradley stood up again. "Then we fight. It is that simple." "General," Kate Williams protested, "you just heard that they have superior technology and numbers. A war could mean the extinction of our species. And surrender means the end of everything we believe in." Bradley shot back. "I would rather die free than live as a slave." The argument that followed was loud and emotional. Some representatives argued for negotiation. Others demanded immediate military action. A few suggested finding a third option that nobody had thought of yet. President Santos called for order. "Before we make any decision, I want to hear from our people, not just the politicians and generals, but ordinary citizens who will have to live with the consequences." She activated a communication link to colonies across human space. "I am opening the floor to anyone who wants to speak." The first voice came from New Boston, the colony world closest to where the hegemony ship had appeared. It belonged to Sam Turner, a factory worker who helped build the mining equipment that powered their expansion. "Madam President, I have 3 kids. I want them to grow up free. I do not care how big their ships are or how fancy their weapons. Nobody has the right to tell us how to live." The next speaker was Linda Price, a teacher on the agricultural world of Harvest. "I have been teaching human children alongside young aliens from 5 different species. They play together, learn together, help each other. If we abandon our allies, what lesson does that teach our children?" More voices followed from across human space. Miners, farmers, scientists, merchants, soldiers. All of them said the same thing in different ways. They would rather fight than surrender their freedom or betray their friends. Dr. Emma King, who had been listening from her research station near Vega, added her voice to the discussion. I have spent my career studying ancient civilizations. History shows us that empires like the hegemony eventually fall. They fall because they rely on fear and force instead of cooperation and innovation. If we stand against them, others will, too. Admiral Hayes nodded his agreement. Dr. King is right. The hegemony has ruled through intimidation for thousands of years. They have never faced a species that refused to submit. We could be the spark that starts a galactic revolution. Kate Williams still looked worried. But at what cost? How many people will die if we choose war? President Santos considered the question carefully. How many people have died already under hegemony rule? How many will die in the future if we let them continue unopposed? She looked around the assembly hall at the faces of humanity's representatives. She saw fear, but she also saw determination. These people had left Earth to build new worlds among the stars. They had not come this far to give up when things got difficult. I call for a formal vote, Santos announced, all in favor of rejecting the hegemony ultimatum and preparing for Sava. Hands went up across the hall. Santos counted them carefully. When she was done, the result was overwhelming. The vote is 412 in favor, 37 against, with 8 abstentions. The Terran Council formally rejects the hegemony ultimatum. The hall erupted in cheers and applause. But President Santos raised her hand for silence. Now comes the hard part. General Bradley, I want full military mobilization. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier we can muster. Yes, Madam President. Admiral Hayes, coordinate with our allied species. Let them know our decision and ask them to prepare their own defenses. Understood. Dr. Reed, I want you to analyze everything we know about hegemony technology. Find weaknesses we can exploit. Already working on it, Madam President. Santos turned to address the entire assembly. To everyone listening across human space, we have chosen the hard path. The next few months will test everything we believe in, but we will not stand alone. We have allies who count on us, and we will not abandon them. She paused to let her words reach every human settlement in the galaxy. The hegemony thinks we are weak because we choose cooperation over domination. They think we will surrender when faced with superior force. They are about to learn that they have made a serious mistake. As the assembly session ended, activity began across human space. On every world, volunteers lined up to join the military. Factories that had been making civilian goods switched to producing weapons and armor. Scientists worked around the clock to develop new technologies. On the mining station orbiting Titan, Sam Turner left his factory job to enlist in the Space Navy. On Harvest, Linda Price organized civilian evacuation plans while continuing to teach her mixed classes of human and alien children. Dr. Emma King abandoned her archaeological research to help develop countermeasures against hegemony psychic abilities. Across dozens of star systems, ordinary people made extraordinary sacrifices. They did not do it because they thought victory would be easy. They did it because they believed some things were worth fighting for. Freedom was one of those things. The right to choose their own path among the stars was another. But most important was the promise they had made to species smaller and weaker than themselves. The promise that humanity would stand between them and those who would do them harm. In the darkness between stars, Overseer Vexithara received reports of human activity, ship movements, military buildup, alliance coordination, all the signs of a species preparing for war. The crystal being felt something it had not experienced in 1,000 years. Uncertainty. Every other species had submitted when faced with hegemony power. These humans seemed genuinely prepared to fight a war they could not win. Perhaps it was time to teach them why no species had successfully resisted the hegemony for 3 millennia. The lesson would be painful, but it would ensure that no other species made the same mistake. The 72-hour deadline passed without a human response. Overseer Vexithara materialized again in Admiral Hayes's command center, but this time the crystal being was not alone. 2 other entities appeared beside it, equally tall and intimidating. "Your silence is answer enough," Vexithara declared. "You choose defiance over wisdom. Very well. The hegemony will demonstrate why no species has successfully resisted us for 3,000 years. Admiral Hayes stood straight and faced the alien beings. "We reject your demands. Human space remains under human control. Your bravery is foolish, Admiral. But the hegemony is not without mercy. We will give you one final opportunity to reconsider. You will face a trial of worth. 3 tests to prove whether your species deserves its current status or should be reduced to servitude." The other crystal beings moved forward. When they spoke, their voices joined with Vexithara's in a harmony that made the air vibrate. "First will be single combat between champions, then fleet engagement under controlled conditions. Finally, if you survive both, a test of will that will determine your ultimate fate." Hayes felt his jaw tighten. "And if we refuse these tests? Then we bypass testing and proceed directly to your subjugation. Choose quickly." The Admiral looked around at his officers. All of them nodded slightly. They understood the situation. The hegemony was offering them a chance to prove themselves in combat rather than face immediate destruction. "We accept your trial." "Wise. The first test begins in 6 of your hours. You will select a champion to face ours in single combat. The battle will take place on the neutral station at coordinates we will provide." New information flowed into everyone's minds. The location was an abandoned mining platform in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, far enough from any colony to avoid collateral damage. "What are the rules of this combat?" Hayes asked. "Simple. Both champions will be armed with similar weapons and armor. The battle continues until one yields or dies. No outside assistance is permitted." The crystal beings began to fade. "Choose your champion carefully, Admiral. The warrior you select will face a Zorith battlemaster. None have defeated one in over 500 years." When the aliens disappeared, the command center erupted in discussion. Officers debated who should represent humanity in such a critical fight. "We need our best soldier," General Bradley declared from the communication screen. "Someone with experience in personal combat." Commander Johnson pulled up files on their most decorated warriors. "Master Sergeant Danny Rodriguez has the most combat experience. 3 tours in the asteroid pirates. Campaign expert in multiple fighting styles." Hayes reviewed Rodriguez's record. The man was tough, smart, and had never lost a fight. But Hayes worried about what they were sending him into. "Get me Sergeant Rodriguez," Hayes ordered. 20 minutes later, Master Sergeant Danny Rodriguez stood in the command center. He was not a big man, maybe 5'8" and lean, but his eyes held the steady confidence of someone who had seen real combat and survived. "Sergeant, we need you to fight for all of humanity," Hayes explained the situation. Rodriguez listened without interruption. When Hayes finished, the sergeant nodded slowly. What do we know about this Zorith species? Dr. Emma King had been researching everything she could find. Very little. The Galactic database mentions them as a warrior race, average height around 12 feet. Natural armor plating, they are bred specifically for combat. Bred for combat, Rodriguez repeated. So they are bigger, stronger, and have natural armor. That appears to be correct. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Good thing I was not bred for anything. I learned to fight the hard way. 6 hours later, Rodriguez stood on the abandoned mining platform, wearing standard human combat armor and carrying a plasma rifle. The platform was a massive structure of metal beams and empty cargo bays, perfect for a fight without interference. The hegemony arrived in a smaller ship that docked on the opposite side of the platform. Human ships maintained a respectful distance. While sensors recorded everything that happened, Rodriguez checked his equipment one final time. Plasma rifle, backup pistol, combat knife, and a few surprises he had added without telling anyone. The armor was lightweight but strong, designed for mobility rather than heavy protection. A shimmer in the air announced the arrival of the alien champion. Rodriguez had expected something big and dangerous. What he saw made him swallow hard. The Zorith warrior was enormous, nearly 12 feet tall, as advertised. Its body was covered in thick, chitinous plates that looked like natural armor. 4 arms ended in clawed hands that gripped energy weapons. Rodriguez did not recognize. The creature's head was insect-like with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked as it moved. When it spoke, the words came out in clicks and hisses that the translation system converted to standard language. I am War Leader Clixathera. You are small, even for a mammal. This will be quick. Rodriguez shouldered his rifle and grinned. Maybe, but I bet it will not be boring. Overseer Vexathara materialized between them. The combat begins when I signal. It ends when one warrior yields or falls. Begin! Clixathara immediately opened fire with both energy weapons. Bolts of superheated plasma sizzled through the air where Rodriguez had been standing, but the human was already moving, rolling behind a support beam as the metal around him began to melt. Rodriguez popped up and returned fire. His plasma bolts struck the alien's natural armor and scattered harmlessly. The Zorith warrior advanced, steadily, firing continuously while Rodriguez scrambled from cover to cover. Your weapons cannot penetrate my carapace, mammal. Surrender now and your death will be quick. Instead of answering, Rodriguez did something unexpected. He stopped running and charged directly at the alien warrior. Clixathera was surprised by the sudden change in tactics. The human was moving fast, zigzagging to make himself a harder target. The alien's energy weapons tracked him, but could not get a clean shot. Rodriguez dove and rolled under the alien's line of fire. As he came up, he was close enough to touch the creature's legs. The Zorith tried to step back, but Rodriguez was already moving. The human pulled a grenade from his belt and slammed it against the joint where the alien's leg armor met its body. The magnetic clamp held it in place for just long enough. Rodriguez threw himself backward as the grenade exploded. The blast did not penetrate the alien's armor, but it did something else. It knocked Clixathera off balance, sending the massive warrior crashing to the platform deck. Before the alien could recover, Rodriguez was on top of it. His combat knife found the gap between armor plates at the creature's neck. The blade slid. Home and Clixathera went still. Rodriguez stood up slowly, breathing hard. Around him, the platform was scorched and smoking from energy weapon fire. The Zorith warrior lay motionless. War leader Clixthara has fallen, Overseer Vexithara announced. The first test goes to humanity, the crystal being studied Rodriguez, with what might have been curiosity. How did you defeat a warrior bred for combat? Rodriguez wiped alien blood from his knife. You said he was bred for combat. That means he was taught to fight in a specific way, probably trained from birth to use superior strength and armor to overwhelm enemies. This is correct. I was not bred for anything. I learned to fight by getting into fights with people bigger and stronger than me. You learn real quick that when you are outgunned, you better be ready to get creative. Vexithara was silent for a moment. Your victory was achieved through deception and cowardice. You avoided direct confrontation, Rodriguez laughed. I call it using my brain. Where I come from, the winner is the one who goes home alive. Everything else is just style points. The human sergeant gathered his weapons and prepared to leave. When do we face your second test? Soon. But understand, human, that your next challenge will not be won through trickery. Fleet combat requires direct confrontation. There will be no place to hide when our warships open fire. Rodriguez looked directly at the crystal being. Maybe, but I bet you are going to be surprised again. As he walked back to his transport, Rodriguez thought about what he had learned. The hegemony bred their warriors for specific purposes and trained them in rigid tactics. They expected their enemies to fight the same way. Humans fought differently. They adapted. They improvised. They used whatever worked and ignored what did not. That might be enough to win a war, if they were lucky. Back on the human ships, Admiral Hayes watched Rodriguez's transport dock. The sergeant had done something no warrior had managed in 500 years. He had defeated a Zorith battlemaster in single combat. Well done, Sergeant, Hayes said when Rodriguez reported to the bridge. Thank you, sir. But Admiral, that alien was tough. Really tough. We won because he expected me to fight like a Zorith. Next time, they will be ready for human tactics. Hayes nodded. Then we will. Have to come up with new tactics they have not seen before? Rodriguez grinned. Yes, sir. That is what humans do best. 3 days after Master Sergeant Rodriguez's victory, Overseer Vexithara returned with disturbing news. The crystal being appeared in Admiral Hayes's command center, looking more solid and menacing than before. Your champion's victory has been noted throughout hegemony space, Vexithara announced. Some of our subject species are beginning to question whether the Zorith are truly invincible. This cannot be allowed to continue. Admiral Hayes felt a cold knot in his stomach. What does that mean? It means the second test will be more decisive. Fleet combat allows no room for the trickery your sergeant employed. Raw power will determine the outcome. Images flowed into everyone's minds. They saw massive alien warships bristling with weapons that could crack planets, shields that could withstand any attack humans could mount, faster-than-light travel that made human ships look like they were standing still. You will select your finest battle group, Vexithara continued. We will provide an equal number of our vessels. The engagement will take place in the Xerion system, where there are no colonies to suffer collateral damage. Hayes studied the tactical information being forced into his mind. How many ships? 5 vessels each. The battle continues until one side is completely destroyed or surrenders. The Admiral felt his hands clench into fists. The hegemony was no longer offering single combat or limited engagement. They wanted a real battle with real consequences. When? Hayes asked. In 72 hours. Choose your ships and commanders. Carefully, Admiral. This test will determine whether humanity deserves to exist as an independent species. Vexithara faded away, leaving the command center in tense silence. Hayes immediately activated communications to the fleet. I need our 5 best ships and crews at the Zerian system in 60 hours. Captain Clark, you will command the task force. Captain Ryan Clark's face appeared on the main screen. Understood, Admiral. Which ships do you want? Hayes consulted with his staff quickly. Take the Defiance as your flagship. Add the heavy cruisers Lincoln and Washington, the destroyer Falcon for speed and maneuverability, and the battleship Roosevelt for heavy firepower. Yes, sir. What about support vessels? None. The hegemony specified 5 ships exactly. We follow their rules for this test. Clark nodded grimly. Admiral, our intelligence suggests their ships are significantly more advanced than ours. How do we fight something we cannot match in firepower? Hayes thought about what Rodriguez had said after his victory. The same way the sergeant beat their champion. We do not fight their fight. We fight ours. 60 hours later, the human task force assembled at the edge of the Zerion system. Captain Clark stood on the bridge of the UHS Defiance, studying the tactical displays. His ships were good, but they were about to face technology beyond anything humans had ever encountered. Sir, Lieutenant Nina Foster reported from the weapons station, I am detecting massive energy signatures approaching from the outer system. The hegemony fleet materialized out of faster-than-light travel like ghosts becoming solid. 5 ships, each one larger and more intimidating than anything in the human force. Their hulls seem to absorb light, making them appear as moving holes in space. All ships, this is Clark. Remember what we discussed. Do not try to match their firepower. Use speed, maneuverability, and unconventional tactics. The alien ships arranged themselves in a perfect formation and began advancing. No communication, no warning. They simply started moving toward the human fleet with deadly purpose. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. Overseer Vexathera's voice filled the bridge. Captain Clark, your fleet is impressive for a young species. Unfortunately, it is also doomed. Our ships carry weapons that can shatter moons. Your vessels will not survive the first exchange of fire. Clark activated his response channel. Maybe, but we will make it interesting. Begin the engagement. The lead hegemony ship opened fire immediately. Beams of energy brighter than stars lanced across space toward the human formation. Captain Clark had been expecting this. All ships, scatter pattern Delta. Execute evasive maneuvers now. The human ships broke formation instantly, each one moving in a different direction. The alien energy beams struck empty space where the formation had been moments before. Clark watched his tactical display as his ships spread out across the battlefield. The hegemony vessels were trying to track multiple targets, but their perfect formation was working against them. Lincoln and Washington attacked the rear ship. Falcon, stay mobile and hit their flanks. Roosevelt, give me covering fire on the lead vessel. The human ships moved like a pack of wolves surrounding larger prey. They were faster and more agile than the alien vessels, which seemed designed for devastating attacks rather than maneuvering combat. The Lincoln and Washington opened fire on the rear hegemony ship. Their plasma cannons and missile batteries struck the alien vessel's shields in coordinated salvos. The shields held, but they flickered under the sustained assault. Their shields are strong, but not unlimited, Clark observed. Keep hitting them. The Falcon, under Commander Julie Morrison, swept around the alien formation at maximum speed. The small destroyer could not match the firepower of the larger ships, but it could move faster than anything else in the battle. Morrison had an idea that was either brilliant or suicidal. Foster, target their weapon arrays with precision shots. Do not try to penetrate their hulls. Just disrupt their targeting systems. Lieutenant Foster understood immediately. Aye, Commander. Concentrated fire on their sensor clusters. The Falcon's weapons, designed for accuracy rather than raw power, began picking apart the external systems on the alien ships. Each shot was precise, aimed at disrupting rather than destroying. Meanwhile, the Roosevelt engaged the lead hegemony vessel in direct combat. The massive battleship's guns could actually penetrate alien shields with concentrated fire, but it was taking heavy damage in return. Roosevelt is losing structural integrity, Clark's tactical officer reported. They cannot maintain that engagement much longer. Clark made a decision that went against every rule of space combat. Roosevelt rammed the lead ship, all power to forward shields and engines. Sir? The communications officer asked in shock. You heard me. Tell Captain Stevens to ram that ship. The Roosevelt suddenly changed course, accelerating directly toward the lead alien vessel. The hegemony ship tried to evade, but the human battleship was too close and moving too fast. The collision was spectacular. The Roosevelt's reinforced prow struck the alien ship's hull like a massive projectile. Both vessels were crippled instantly, drifting apart in clouds of debris and venting atmosphere. One enemy ship down, Clark announced. 4 to go, but the sacrifice had worked. The remaining hegemony ships were now facing 4 human vessels instead of 5 against 5. More importantly, the aliens had lost their formation and their tactical coordination. Lieutenant Foster had been studying the alien ships during the battle. She noticed something interesting about their weapon systems. Captain, I think their energy weapons need time to recharge between shots. If we can time our attacks right, we might be able to hit them during their vulnerable periods. Clark nodded. All ships, coordinate your fire patterns. Wait for their weapons to cycle, then hit them all at once. The human fleet began a complex dance around the remaining alien ships. They would attack in coordinated waves, then scatter before the aliens could return fire effectively. It was exhausting for the human crews, but it was working. The Lincoln managed to break through the shields of one alien ship and cripple its main engines. The Washington followed up by destroying its weapon systems. The crippled vessel drifted, helplessly, no longer a threat. The Falcon, still moving at incredible speed, had been systematically destroying the external sensors on all the alien ships. Without their sophisticated targeting systems, the hegemony vessels were firing blind. 2 down, 3 to go, Clark reported. But the aliens were adapting. The remaining ships began moving closer together, covering each other's blind spots. There, fire became more coordinated as they adjusted their tactics. They are learning from us, Foster observed. Then we need to teach them something new, Clark replied. He activated the mining charges Foster had suggested loading onto the ships before the battle. They were not military weapons, but they were powerful and could be deployed in creative ways. All ships, prepare mining charges for deployment. We are going to mine the battlefield. The human ships began dropping the improvised explosives throughout the combat zone. To the aliens, it looked like the humans were creating some kind of defensive barrier. The truth was much more creative. Clark waited until the alien ships moved into the middle of the minefield, then gave the order. Detonate all charges simultaneously. The explosions created a massive cloud of debris and electromagnetic interference. The alien ships, with their sophisticated sensors, were temporarily blinded by the chaos. In that moment of confusion, the human ships struck with everything they had. The Washington and Lincoln concentrated their fire on one alien vessel and managed to destroy it completely. The Falcon and Defiance attacked another ship and crippled its weapons. When the debris cloud cleared, only 2 hegemony ships remained, functional. They were facing 4 human vessels in a battle they had been certain to win. Impossible. Vexthara's voice echoed across the communication. The news of humanity's victory at Zarion spread like wildfire across the galaxy. For the first time in 3,000 years, someone had defeated hegemony forces in direct combat. On dozens of worlds under alien rule, oppressed species began to whisper about the impossible thing that had happened. Dr. Emma King was not thinking about galactic politics as she worked in the ancient ruins on Kepler 442b. She had been studying the archaeological site for 6 months, trying to understand the civilization that had once lived there. The discovery she made 3 days after the Zarion battle would change everything. "This does not make sense," she muttered, brushing dust from a stone carving. Her assistant, Dr. Marcus Webb, looked up from his own work. "What have you found?" Emma stood back from the wall she had been examining. The carving showed figures that looked almost human, working alongside several different alien species. They were building something together, all of them contributing to what appeared to be a massive space station. "Marcus, look at this. These carvings show cooperation between different species, but according to the galactic database, this planet was uninhabited when we found it." Marcus joined her at the wall. "Maybe the database is wrong. Or maybe this civilization died out before the current galactic powers mapped this region." Emma continued studying the carvings. The more she looked, the more disturbed she became. The figures working together looked familiar. Not just the human-like ones, but several of the alien species matched descriptions of races currently under hegemony control. "Marcus, send a message to Admiral Hayes. Tell him I need to speak with someone who has detailed information about the hegemony's history." 6 hours later, Emma was talking to Commander Steve Johnson via long-range communication. She had transmitted images of the carvings to him and waited for his analysis. "Dr. King, these symbols are fascinating," Johnson said. "Some of them match linguistic patterns we have seen in hegemony communications. But they are much older than anything in our records." "How much older?" "If I had to guess, maybe 5,000 years. But that is impossible. The hegemony has only existed for 3,000 years, according to their own statements." Emma felt excitement building in her chest. "Commander, what if the hegemony has not been telling the truth about their history?" She activated a new display showing more carvings from deeper in the ruins. These images were darker, showing the same cooperative civilization under attack by crystal beings that looked exactly like Overseer Vexthara. "Look at this sequence," Emma said. "It shows the cooperative civilization being destroyed by beings identical to our current enemies. But there is more." The final set of carvings showed survivors escaping in spaceships, scattering across the galaxy. Some of the ships contained mixed crews of different species working together. Johnson studied the images carefully. "Dr. King, are you suggesting that the hegemony destroyed a previous galactic civilization?" "I am suggesting that humanity is not the first species to challenge their dominance through cooperation instead of conquest. And I think they eliminated all evidence of that previous challenge." Emma sent more images to Johnson. These showed the aftermath of the crystal being's victory. Worlds stripped of resources, species reduced to slavery, a rigid hierarchy imposed across the galaxy. "Commander, I need you to search our databases for any reference to a species called the Architects. Look for anything, no matter how old or obscure." Johnson's research took 2 days. When he contacted Emma again, his expression was grim. "Dr. King, you were right. I found fragments of information scattered across dozens of different sources. Most of it has been deliberately erased, but pieces survived." He transmitted his findings to Emma's station. The data painted a picture that made her blood run cold. The Architects were a space-faring species that emerged about 6,000 years ago. They were the first to develop true faster-than-light travel. Instead of using their advantage to conquer other species, they shared the technology. Emma studied the reconstructed timeline. So they created a galactic civilization based on cooperation. Exactly. For over 1,000 years, the Architect Alliance grew. Dozens of species working together, sharing technology and resources. It was the golden age of galactic civilization. What happened to them? Johnson's expression darkened. The crystal beings happened. According to the fragments I found, they called themselves the Eternal Hierarchy back then. They viewed the Architect Alliance as an abomination that violated the natural order. Emma felt pieces clicking together in her mind. The natural order being that the strong should dominate the weak. Right. The crystal beings fought a war that lasted 500 years. They systematically destroyed every world that practiced cooperation instead of domination. They erased the architects from history and imposed their own system of rigid hierarchy. Emma looked at the carvings around her with new understanding. These ruins are not just archaeological sites. They are evidence of genocide. The hegemony did not just conquer the galaxy. They erased an entire way of life. And now humanity is doing the same thing the architects did. We cooperate with other species instead of dominating them. The implications hit both of them at the same time. Emma voiced what they were both thinking. We are not just fighting for our freedom. We are the return of something the hegemony thought they had destroyed forever. She immediately contacted Admiral Hayes with her findings. The Admiral listened to her report with growing amazement and horror. Doctor, are you telling me that this conflict is not about territory or resources? It is about two completely different philosophies of civilization? Yes, Admiral. The hegemony sees cooperation as a threat to the natural order. They believe the strong must rule the weak or chaos will result. Humanity represents the return of the architect philosophy they thought they had eliminated. Hayes understood now why Vexithara had seemed so disturbed by human behavior. That is why they want to destroy us completely. We are not just another species to be conquered. We are proof that their entire worldview might be wrong. Emma nodded. And Admiral, there is something else. The carvings suggest that some architect survivors escaped the genocide. They scattered across the galaxy, hiding among the species that submitted to hegemony rule. Meaning what? Meaning we might not be as alone as we think. If the surviving architects preserved their beliefs in secret, they might be waiting for someone to challenge the hegemony again. As Emma spoke, similar discoveries were being made on other worlds. Archaeological teams that had been studying ancient ruins began finding evidence of the lost civilization. Linguists discovered that several supposedly primitive languages contained fragments of architect writing. Geneticists found traces of architect DNA in species that had supposedly evolved independently. The picture that emerged was staggering. The architects had not just been erased from history, they had been erased from the very genetic record of the galaxy. Only fragments survived, hidden so deeply that even the hegemony had not found them all. On the industrial world of New Detroit, a factory worker named Paul Anderson was helping to build new weapons for the war effort. His grandmother had always told him stories about the old days when different species worked together to build great things. Paul had assumed they were just fairy tales. After hearing Dr. King's discoveries, he began asking questions. What he learned changed everything. His grandmother's stories were not fairy tales. They were memories passed down through generations of survivors who had hidden their true heritage for thousands of years. Paul was a descendant of the architects. Similar revelations began occurring across human space and beyond. Species that had served the hegemony for millennia began to remember suppressed histories. Genetic markers that had been explained as random mutations were recognized as signs of architect heritage. The galaxy was full of architect descendants who had been living in hiding for 3,000 years. When Overseer Vexithara learned of these discoveries, the crystal being experienced something it had not felt since the original war against the architects. Fear. "This cannot be," Vexithara declared to its fellow overseers. "We eliminated every trace of the architect heresy. We purged their genetic lines and destroyed their worlds. Apparently, we did not eliminate everything," another overseer replied. "The humans have awakened something that was meant to remain, buried forever." Vexithara studied reports coming in from across hegemony space, riots on industrial worlds, work stoppages on mining planets, species that had been docile for millennia suddenly questioning their place in the hierarchy. "The humans must be destroyed completely," Vexithara concluded. "Not conquered, not subjugated, destroyed. And every species that shows signs of architect contamination must be eliminated with them. That would mean killing billions of beings across dozens of worlds. Better billions die than the natural order collapse into chaos." The final test was no longer about proving human worth. It had become about preventing the return of a way of life that threatened everything the hegemony had built. As word of the discoveries spread, Admiral Hayes received a message that changed the strategic situation completely. It came from an unexpected source. Captain Julie Morrison of the destroyer Falcon was patrolling near the edge of human space when her sensors detected incoming ships. Lots of them. The final confrontation began when 3 massive hegemony world ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Behind them came a fleet of 500 warships, representing the full military might of the Galactic Empire. Admiral Hayes stood in the command center on Mars, watching the tactical displays with grim determination. Every human ship in the galaxy had been recalled to defend Earth. Military vessels, converted civilian freighters, even private yachts armed with whatever weapons their owners could mount. It was not enough. "Sir," Commander Johnson reported, "we have confirmed 320 human vessels ready for combat. Against their numbers, we are outnumbered almost 2-1. Hayes nodded slowly. The odds were terrible, but they had known this moment would come. "What about our allies?" Captain Julie Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system from her position near Jupiter. "Admiral, I am showing incoming fleets from 47 different star systems, mixed formations of species that have never worked together before." On the main display, Hayes watched as alien fleets began arriving in the Sol system. Ships he had never seen before, representing species that had been under hegemony rule for thousands of years. They came in small groups at first, then in larger formations as word spread across the galaxy. "This is Captain Zethara of the Thylorian Liberation Fleet," announced one of the alien commanders. "We stand with humanity against the hegemony oppression. More." Voices followed on the communication channels. "This is the Kelleran Free Navy. We fight beside our human allies." "Vrakan Defense Force reporting for duty." "The Melthari Resistance stands ready." Hayes felt amazement and hope building in his chest. These species had hidden their true loyalties for millennia, waiting for someone to challenge the hegemony successfully. Humanity's victories had given them the courage to fight for their freedom. Dr. Emma King's archaeological discovery had spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The revelation that the hegemony had committed genocide against the Architect Alliance had awakened something that had been sleeping for thousands of years. "Admiral," Johnson reported, "final count shows over 800 vessels in the Allied fleet. We still face superior numbers, but the odds are much better." Hayes activated the fleet-wide communication system. "This is Admiral Hayes to all vessels. Today we fight not just for humanity, but for the right of all species to choose their own destiny. The hegemony claims that the strong must rule the weak. We will show them that cooperation makes us all stronger." Overseer Vexithara materialized in the command center one final time. The crystal being looked different now, more solid and menacing than before. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of absolute authority. "Admiral Hayes, you have made a grave error. The species joining you are rebels and criminals. We offer you one final chance to surrender and accept judgment." Hayes stepped forward to face the alien entity. "We reject your authority, Overseer. This system belongs to humanity and our allies. Leave now or face the consequences." "You cannot defeat us," Vexithara replied. "Our world ships carry weapons that can destroy your entire planet. Your fleet is composed of inferior vessels crewed by inferior species." "Maybe," Hayes said calmly. "But we have something you do not understand. We have hope." Vexithara's crystalline form flickered with what might have been confusion. "Hope is irrelevant. Only power matters." "That is where you are wrong," Hayes replied. "Power without hope becomes tyranny. Hope without power becomes wishful thinking. But power combined with hope becomes justice." The crystal being faded away without another word. Hayes knew the talking was over. The final battle was about to begin. The hegemony fleet arranged itself in a perfect formation and began advancing toward Earth. The 3 world ships took the center position, protected by rings of smaller warships. It was an impressive display of military might that had crushed resistance for 3 millennia. The Allied fleet spread out to meet them. Human ships formed the center of the formation, with alien vessels taking positions based on their capabilities. Fast attack ships on the flanks, heavy cruisers in the main battle line, support vessels providing cover. Captain Ryan Clark commanded the flagship UHS Humanity's Dawn, a new dreadnought that had been completed just days before the battle. His bridge crew included humans and aliens working side by side, representing the cooperation that the hegemony found so threatening. "All ships, this is Clark. Remember what we learned at Zerion. Do not try to match their firepower. Use mobility, coordination, and unconventional tactics." The battle began when the lead world ship opened fire. A beam of energy brighter than the sun lanced across space toward the Allied fleet. But the human ships were already moving, scattering in patterns that had been practiced for weeks. The energy beam struck empty space where the fleet had been moments before. Captain Julie Morrison, now commanding a group of fast attack ships, led the first strike against the hegemony formation. Her mixed squadron of human destroyers and alien corvettes swept around the enemy fleet at maximum speed. "Target their sensor arrays," Morrison ordered. "Blind them before they can coordinate their fire." The attack ships struck at dozens of points, simultaneously. They could not penetrate the heavy armor of the hegemony vessels, but they could disrupt their sophisticated targeting systems. Meanwhile, the main battle line engaged the enemy fleet directly. Human dreadnoughts and alien battleships traded fire with hegemony warships in massive exchanges that lit up space like miniature stars. Lieutenant Nina Foster, now a commander aboard the Roosevelt II, had developed new tactics based on the mining charge strategy from Xerion. All ships, prepare to deploy gravitic mines. We are going to make the battlefield work for us. The Allied fleet began dropping artificial gravity generators throughout the combat zone. The devices created gravitational fields that disrupted faster-than-light travel and interfered with energy weapon targeting. Their ships are designed for fighting in open space, Foster explained to her crew. We are changing the rules of engagement. The Hegemony fleet found itself fighting in an environment that negated many of their technological advantages. Their perfect formations became liabilities as gravitational fields pulled ships out of position. But the world ships remained a terrible threat. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. When they fired simultaneously, even the scattered Allied formation took heavy losses. The converted freighter New Hope, crewed by volunteers from the agricultural world of Harvest, took a direct hit from a world ship weapon. The ship disappeared in a flash of light, taking 300 brave souls with it. We cannot absorb losses like this, Admiral Hayes observed grimly. We need to neutralize those world ships. Master Sergeant Danny Rodriguez, now commanding a Special Forces unit aboard fast assault ships, had been studying the world ships for weaknesses. Admiral, I think I have an idea, but it will require a suicide mission. Explain. The world ships are so large they cannot maneuver quickly. If we can get boarding parties onto their hulls, we might be able to plant charges on their main weapons. Hayes considered the proposal. It was desperate and dangerous, but it might be their only chance. How many ships would you need? Give me 50 fast attack vessels and crews willing to die for the cause. Hayes looked around his command center at the faces of his officers. All of them nodded. They understood that desperate times required desperate measures. You have your ships, Sergeant. Make them count.